Bill Spencer does not enter a war to win territory alone. He enters to rewrite memory. And when he stands behind Katie's new chapter, igniting a full-scale brand battle that rattles Los Angeles, Ridge understands with chilling clarity that this is no longer about competition, market share, or creative dominance. This is about humiliation carefully engineered, about forcing a man to taste the same helplessness he once inflicted on others. Bill does not merely want Katie to succeed. He wants Ridge to remember what it feels like to lose control in public, to watch power drain away while pretending nothing has changed. For Bill, this moment has been a long time coming. He has never forgotten the years when Ridge stood at the center of influence, dismissing rivals with a smile that suggested inevitability. Ridge's authority was never just professional, it was cultural. He defined legitimacy. He decided who mattered, who was trusted, who belonged at the table. Bill learned early that challenging such power head-on was futile. Ridge thrived on confrontation. He fed on opposition. So Bill waited. He learned patience. He learned leverage. And most importantly, he learned that the most devastating victories are the ones that appear accidental until it is too late. Katie's emergence as a force in her own right gives Bill the perfect opening. On the surface, his support looks noble, even restrained. He frames it as belief in her vision, as partnership, as correction of past wrongs. But beneath that framing lies a far more deliberate intention. Bill wants to weaponize success. He wants Katie's rise to become the mirror, in which Ridge is forced to see his own decline. Every milestone she reaches is designed not only to elevate her, but to destabilize him. When Bill begins to funnel resources into Katie's venture, the effect is immediate and unsettling. Funding flows with an ease that signals confidence. Connections materialize without explanation. Opportunities once assumed to be exclusive to Forrester suddenly appear elsewhere. The industry notices. Whispers spread. People begin to reassess old assumptions about where power truly resides. And Ridge, watching from the center of his empire, feels the first genuine tremor of uncertainty. This uncertainty infuriates him, but it also frightens him. Ridge has always understood competition as something he could outmaneuver through authority and reputation. What Bill introduces is different. It is not a challenge to Ridge's skill, but to his inevitability. Bill does not argue that Forrester is obsolete, he demonstrates that alternatives are viable. And viability, once proven, cannot be unproven. The true cruelty of Bill's strategy reveals itself slowly. He does not attack Forrester head-on. He does not announce defections or stage dramatic takeovers. Instead, he pulls people away one by one, each move small enough to appear reasonable, yet significant enough to leave a mark. A designer here. A consultant there. A strategic partner, who suddenly sees more upside elsewhere. Every individual Bill steals from Forrester is not just a resource lost, it is a message delivered. Each defection cuts deeper than the last because it is personal. These are not faceless assets. They are people Ridge once believed were loyal, people who benefited from his patronage, people who understood his vision. Their departure forces him to confront a possibility he has long resisted, that loyalty built on dominance is fragile, and that respect withheld too long eventually expires. Bill understands this dynamic intimately. He knows that Ridge's power has always depended on perception as much as reality. By undermining that perception incrementally, Bill ensures that Ridge cannot isolate the threat or neutralize it with a single decisive move. The damage is cumulative. It erodes confidence not just in Ridge's leadership, but in the stability of the system he represents. As resources and opportunities continue to shift, the atmosphere around Forrester changes. Conversations become guarded. Assurances sound rehearsed. People who once spoke freely now measure their words. Ridge senses this shift acutely, even if he refuses to acknowledge its cause. He tells himself that Bill is overreaching, that this surge of momentum will collapse under its own weight. But beneath that rationalization lies a growing awareness that something fundamental has changed. When Ridge finally confronts Bill, the realization crystallizes. This is not a business dispute that can be negotiated or resolved through compromise. It is a campaign of reckoning. Bill is not seeking equilibrium, he is seeking imbalance. He wants Ridge off-center, reactive, exposed. He wants him to experience what it is like to watch decisions unfold without having the power to stop them. The irony is that Bill's approach is remarkably disciplined. He does not gloat. He does not taunt. He allows the consequences to speak for themselves. Each time Ridge loses someone to Katie's orbit, Bill remains just visible enough to be associated with the shift, but distant enough to deny direct orchestration. This ambiguity intensifies Ridge's frustration. He cannot point to a single act of aggression. He cannot accuse Bill without appearing paranoid. The absence of overt hostility becomes its own form of provocation. For Ridge, this is torture. He is a man accustomed to confronting threats head-on, to asserting dominance through clarity and force. Bill denies him that opportunity. He forces Ridge into a defensive posture, one where every reaction risks confirming weakness. The more Ridge pushes back publicly, the more he appears threatened. The more he attempts to assert control, the more others begin to question whether that control still exists. This is how Bill turns momentum into weaponry. He understands that power is not seized in moments of crisis, but redistributed during periods of uncertainty. By the time Ridge fully grasps the scope of what is happening, the infrastructure of his influence has already begun to shift. People are no longer asking for his approval, they are informing him of decisions already made. The war escalates, but it does so without spectacle. No grand announcements. No dramatic betrayals. Just the steady migration of confidence away from Forrester and toward Katie's vision, fueled by Bill's relentless support. Each opportunity Bill creates elsewhere diminishes the exclusivity Ridge once commanded. Each partnership he secures reframes the narrative of who leads and who follows. For Ridge, the cumulative effect is devastating. He realizes that Bill is not trying to defeat him outright. He is trying to redefine the battlefield so thoroughly that Ridge no longer recognizes his own strengths. This is not about pride alone, it is about identity. Ridge's sense of self has always been intertwined with his role as gatekeeper, as arbiter of taste and authority. Bill is systematically dismantling that role, piece by piece. What makes this conflict so dangerous is that it is fueled by memory as much as ambition. Bill remembers every dismissal, every slight, every moment he was treated as an outsider to a world Ridge controlled. He remembers the helplessness of watching decisions made without his consent. Now, he is returning that experience with precision, ensuring that Ridge feels every loss not as an abstract setback, but as a personal reckoning. As the brand war intensifies, those watching from the sidelines begin to understand what is truly at stake. This is not a rivalry between companies. It is a collision between two philosophies of power. Ridge believes authority is inherited, maintained through continuity and tradition. Bill believes power is earned through disruption and adaptability. Katie's success becomes the proving ground for these opposing worldviews. In this environment, neutrality becomes impossible. People are forced to choose not because they love Katie or hate Ridge, but because they must align with the future they believe is most stable. Bill exploits this necessity relentlessly. He offers opportunity where Ridge offers legacy. He offers momentum where Ridge offers history. And history, once it stops moving, becomes weight. By the time Ridge recognizes that Bill's true objective is not victory, but reversal, forcing him to experience the vulnerability he once imposed on others, the transformation is already underway. His empire still stands, but its aura has changed. It no longer feels unassailable. And in a world where perception shapes reality, that shift is irreversible. Bill watches all of this with cold satisfaction. Not because he delights in destruction, but because he believes justice has a rhythm of its own. Ridge once believed himself untouchable. Now he is learning what Bill learned long ago, that power, when hoarded too tightly, eventually invites resistance. And resistance, when nurtured patiently, becomes inevitability. This is not the end of the war. It is merely the moment both men understand its true nature. For Bill, the goal is no longer to win, but to ensure that Ridge never again mistakes dominance for permanence. For Ridge, the challenge is no longer to defeat Bill, but to survive a landscape where control is no longer guaranteed. And in that realization lies the most dangerous truth of all. The war Bill has ignited cannot be undone, only endured. Steffi Forrester was raised to believe that order is not optional. From her earliest memories, discipline was framed as protection, structure as survival. In a family where emotions routinely erupted into spectacle, Steffi learned to value rules, because rules, at least in theory, did not fluctuate with mood or resentment. They held steady when people did not. For years, this belief served her well. It allowed her to function in spaces where personal history threatened to overwhelm professional judgment. It allowed her to draw lines where others blurred them. It allowed her to believe that leadership was not about feeling, but about containment. That belief begins to fracture the moment she realizes that Ridge is no longer leading through principle, but through impulse. At first, the shift is subtle. A raised voice where there was once restraint. A decision made in anger rather than deliberation. A public reaction that bypasses process entirely. Steffi notices these changes not as isolated incidents, but as a pattern forming beneath the surface. Ridge is no longer enforcing rules, he is enforcing feelings. He is substituting authority with reaction, structure with instinct. An instinct, Steffi knows, is unreliable when power is at stake. The moment Thomas aligns himself with Katie, something inside Steffi finally breaks its silence. She cannot dismiss this as manipulation from the outside. She cannot reduce it to Hope's influence or Bill's interference. Thomas is not an outsider. He is family. His choice cannot be explained away without confronting the possibility that the system itself is failing the people inside it. That realization terrifies her more than any external threat ever could. For years, Steffi has relied on a familiar narrative: when conflict arises, outside forces disrupt, insiders respond. But now the disruption comes from within. Thomas's decision exposes a fault line Steffi has avoided acknowledging: that loyalty enforced through pressure eventually collapses. That obedience without consent breeds resentment. And that rules applied selectively are not rules at all, but tools. Steffi's internal conflict deepens as she watches Ridge react. His anger is immediate, visible, and increasingly indiscriminate. He lashes out not only at perceived enemies, but at anyone who fails to affirm his version of events. Steffi recognizes this behavior for what it is: fear disguised as authority. Ridge is not defending the family, he is defending his control over it. And the more he tightens his grip, the more resistance he provokes. This leaves Steffi standing at a crossroads she never wanted to face. On one path lies suppression. She could assert her authority, reinforce hierarchy, and shut down dissent before it crystallizes into defiance. She could make examples of those who question Ridge, sending a clear message that deviation will not be tolerated. This approach would restore immediate order, but at a cost Steffy understands all too well. Fear may enforce compliance, but it poisons trust. A company run on intimidation does not innovate, it survives until it implodes. And a family ruled by fear does not heal, it fractures quietly until the break becomes irreversible. On the other path lies acknowledgement. Steffy could admit, publicly or privately, that Ridge has crossed a line. She could name the truth she sees forming in front of her, that leadership driven by emotion is destabilizing, not protective. But this choice carries its own dangers. Admitting Ridge is wrong does not correct him, it challenges him. And challenging him risks open war within the family, a conflict that would not remain contained within boardrooms or meetings, but spill into every relationship they share. Steffy hesitates, and that hesitation becomes its own catalyst. Those watching from the margins sense it immediately. Neutral parties, once content to observe, begin to interpret Steffy's silence as permission. Not explicit approval, but absence of restraint. They are waiting for a signal, any indication that opposition will not be punished. And the longer Steffy delays, the more that signal feels inevitable. Her restraint, meant to preserve balance, begins to function as an opening. The anti-Ridge faction does not emerge through dramatic declarations. It forms organically, through shared unease and whispered acknowledgement. People compare notes. They notice similar experiences, similar discomfort. They begin to understand that what they feel is not isolated, but systemic. Ridge's volatility is no longer perceived as temporary stress. It is seen as a pattern with consequences. Steffy watches this coalition grow with increasing alarm. She realizes that by refusing to choose, she is allowing others to choose for her. The authority she hoped to preserve through neutrality is eroding precisely because she has not exercised it. Yet she remains paralyzed by the implications of action. Every move she considers threatens to ignite a fire she may not be able to control. Her personal history complicates everything. Steffy is not an objective observer in this conflict. Ridge is not just a leader, he is her father. Challenging him is not a professional maneuver, it is a personal rupture. To admit he is wrong is to confront years of loyalty, sacrifice, and shared identity. It is to risk redefining their relationship in ways that cannot be undone. At the same time, Thomas's position forces her to confront another uncomfortable truth. If her brother feels compelled to align elsewhere to reclaim autonomy, what does that say about the environment they have all normalized? Steffy prides herself on protecting the family, yet she must now consider whether that protection has come at the expense of growth. Whether stability has been achieved through suppression rather than trust. As days pass, the pressure intensifies. Ridge grows more reactive. His decisions become increasingly public, increasingly emotional. Each outburst validates the fears of those already questioning his leadership. Each attempt to reassert control accelerates the loss of it. Steffy sees the irony with painful clarity. Ridge is creating the very opposition he believes he is fighting. The waiting becomes unbearable. Everyone is watching Steffy, whether she acknowledges it or not. Her reputation as a disciplinarian, as someone who values structure above sentiment, gives her silence weight. If she speaks, it will matter. If she acts, it will define the next phase of the family's future. And so the pressure builds, not toward consensus, but toward inevitability. What Steffy understands now is that there is no safe choice. Suppression leads to obedience hollowed out by fear. Admission leads to conflict fueled by wounded pride. Either path risks destruction. But indecision, she realizes too late, is not neutral. It is corrosive. It allows resentment to metastasize without containment. In this moment, Steffi confronts the most difficult truth of leadership, that discipline without justice becomes tyranny, and loyalty without accountability becomes complicity. She cannot protect both the system and the person undermining it. She must choose which one defines her legacy. As the anti-Ridge coalition prepares to move, emboldened by her silence, Steffi feels the weight of every second she has delayed. She understands now that they are not acting because they hate Ridge, but because they fear what he is becoming. And fear, when shared, is powerful. Whether Steffi ultimately asserts control or exposes the truth remains uncertain. But what is clear is that the moment for quiet management has passed. The lights are about to turn on, one way or another. And when they do, there will be no shadows left to hide in, least of all for Steffi herself.